Hello, my name is Josh Brister, and you've came into another episode of the Christian Resistance, and I'm very happy that you're here. Today we have some pretty heavy hitters in the apologetics world, and we're going to get to that. I want them to introduce themselves, tell us what they've been doing recently. The purpose of this broadcast, of this podcast rather, is just to go through the reasons for being a Christian. Why is Christianity rational? And why is atheism irrational? Why is it implausible when you consider explanations and different things like that? But anyway, we're first going to go to, well, all three of these people are my friends. But Andrew, could you introduce yourself and just say anything?
Hi all, I'm Andrew Stratelites. I'm mostly on Twitter. My interests are philosophy, apologetics, applied theology, and virtue ethics. Most of my online life is on Twitter. Occasionally you can find me on Discord or on other videos and podcasts. I'm an Anglican, and that's me in a nutshell.
Nice. That's really good. Anyway, thank you for being here, Andrew. I do appreciate it. Craig.
Hi.
Introduce yourself.
And tell what I've been working on recently.
Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Craig Reed. Actually, Josh and I were just recently in a debate on the Non Sequitur channel that went really well.
Yeah, that was fun.
I've started shifting gears a little, as Stephanie knows, because she does cameos in my video. Where I'm going to train her in presuppositional apologetics, and there's a reason why I've started shifting gears. There's a core of which I'll probably talk about a little bit in this thing, but there's a core of, they push the arguments too far, but there's a core of logical, like really strong logical philosophical grounding for a certain part of the presup arguments. And I noticed that when I was analyzing the resurrection argument, is that the premise of the resurrection argument is you put the material facts out, and the Christian and the atheist are coming at it from two entirely different points of view that are going to really influence how they adjudicate those facts. So that's why I started looking at a precept, because I think that addresses that issue. And as I said, Stephanie's been appearing, making cameos in my videos a lot recently. And that
I got a funny voice on there too.
That's the only voice I do. At one point in one of the videos, I do Jessica, and I go like this, and it's the same voice.
Do you remember Mr. Bill? Mr. Bill.
Yeah, it's the same voice actually.
It is. It's good.
Nice. That's really cool. Yeah, it was a fun debate. Possibly we could do it one in the future. Who knows? But yeah, it was fun. It was definitely fun. SJ, I'd like you to also introduce yourself and just tell the audience what you've been up to.
Hi, thank you so much. So I'm a business professor, and I teach management classes. I teach leadership also, and other classes like business communication. 2 different EMBA classes that I'm going to be teaching. Our inaugural Doctorate of Business Administration class starting this fall, which I'm pretty excited about. So it's a research class. And so that's pretty fun. And so that's my academic job. And then in my other world, I like studying Christianity, and I like studying all of the evidence that we have for the resurrection, because there is a mountain of it. And I think people need to know about that. And I also like to do YouTube. So I get on YouTube a lot. I have a channel too. And I sometimes Craig comes on my channel, Andrew's been on my channel, and Josh has been on my channel. So, and sometimes we even all go together on my channel, which we should probably do. We should probably create some sort of roundtables or something.
Yeah, we're doing a thing. We got a thing coming up on your channel, Steph. Don't forget to plug that.
Oh, yeah, that's right. At the end of the week, if you guys have nothing better to do, at 3:00 Eastern, so Eastern Daylight Time, 3:00, you can see 2 Christians and an atheist walk into a bar. And that's going to be with Craig, myself, and Jeff Williams. And of course, if anybody else wants to come in there, like Josh or Andrew, let me know. We can certainly arrange that. So that's coming up.
Well, I really like these kind of these all-star panels. I want to do one. I think we should title it "Four Horsemen of Apologetics." You remember the four horsemen of atheism, right? Richard Dawkins, Sam Harris, and Christopher Hitchens, and Daniel Dennett, I think.
Yeah.
But I say we're the four horsemen of apologetics. But
And the most
we'll get
humble.
to that. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, well, there's so many things we can get to. One thing I wanted to talk about first that I think it's important to for people that are interested in this subject of the rational warrant for Christianity and why a person should be a Christian and not an atheist, for example, is the question of certainty. It's strange. It's a lot of people think you can only know something if you're certain about it. And of course, no Christian is saying we're certain about Christianity. We have good rational grounds for believing it. So, and that's called justified true belief. So I think that idea will get, tear down a lot of the intellectual smoke screen around this. People fail to come to Christ because they think, well, it has to be certain. Not at all. That's not how we live our life. That's not how we get up or how we find things to do or how what our purpose in life is. We don't live according to mathematical certainty, but we live according to good reasons. And so, given the history of the West, of Western the Western intellectual tradition, there are good reasons for why Christianity supplanted the Roman Empire. That so many intellectuals have believed in Christianity, and that's for good reasons. So that's one thing we try to bring back. I think all four of us try to bring back some of these arguments, though not certain. Though they're good arguments, they're reasonable arguments that are more plausible than their negation. So I don't think certainty should keep or prevent a person from becoming a Christian or a theist. Does anyone have anything to say about that before we proceed?
I would have to say, my point is, I think that atheists don't come to atheism because of any sort of logical reasons. I think that, and that would imply the certainty idea. I think that many of them come to atheism through emotional reasons. And I know that's going to be controversial to the atheists, but it's just that the situations that I've seen, it's when they said a lot of prayers and they feel like their prayers weren't answered, which my heart goes out to them. But we're not on God's clock. So we have to know that God will open our eyes when he knows we're ready. And so that's just something I think sometimes too early.
And sometimes the best prayers are unanswered. I've found that out in my life.
Mm-hmm. Or what seems like unanswered.
Yeah. Andrew or Craig, do you have anything? Do you want to follow up?
Related to that, when I became a Christian, it was because of a powerful religious experience. And that's been like one of the core arguments that I've been putting on my channel. But the problem with that as a warrant for somebody else is that by definition, first person subjective. So to give a person outside of myself, like an atheist who doesn't share the belief, epistemic, they have no epistemic, what's the word I'm looking for? They access to my inner life. So I can't actually give them my religious experience. It's really good evidence for me personally. It's really powerful and compelling, but it's hard to translate that into a third person argument. So that's why I started looking at it from other angles, because it's only going to get you so far. I mean, I could give somebody who is interested, the tools to have a religious experience and then the tools to amplify that experience. But that's not necessarily an argument that they can logically go, aha, yes, I see X equals X, yada, yada, yada. That's how I would address what you said.
The point that I would make is the commitment one makes to a belief is at least somewhat independent from the confidence that one has in the belief, right? So the analogy that I'll use is like marrying a spouse, that depending on actually how committed you are to that relationship, your odds of success will vary, right? So going into it, you might not only have like 50% probability of it being successful, but if you act as though you're going to be successful and or commit to making it successful, those go up. And part of that might actually be acting in accord with the belief that it will be successful. And so this is sort of the other interesting thing is, especially at the beginning of these things, your commitment may not match the certainty epistemically that you have. And so this is another thing, right? That because humans are fallible and we will never know things with certainty, you can always use uncertainty as an excuse not to take action or not to commit to something, right? Because you never know whether your spouse is going to be a good spouse and good parent to your children until you have children. And so that lack of knowledge is always there if you like want to use it as a pretext for not getting married, right? And similarly with belief, you can always use uncertainty in the truth of God or religion or the Christian religion as a pretext not to make that commitment to it.
I think that's a great point. I think something that's important to note is that, what we can say, or the atheist can say they refuse to come to Christ or consider the Christianity until they can prove it's certain. But of course, no one lives that way. We don't live according to certitude. There's very few things in life that are certain. So, I think we need to keep that in mind. I think if people kept that in mind, there would be, a more willingness to hear the gospel out. It's not about certainty. Good points, everybody. I also think it has a lot to do with background beliefs. The question of whether Christianity is true, or the question of whether does God exist or not, those don't come in a vacuum. They are loaded onto other things. Like for example, when David Hume discusses morality, his radical departure from morality or from causation, saying we don't really have a reason for any of that. Well, of course, in 99% of his life, he lives according to habits, acquired habits, things he does without thinking about it. This is the common sense that Thomas Reid before him and Alistair McIntyre in his book After Virtue have talked about. So this belief or non-belief, it's never in a vacuum. There are good reasons, and the atheist actually takes things for granted and even making a case for his atheism. He takes things for granted in believing in science. He believes in causation, for example. So I think there are a lot of defeaters for atheism. I don't think it can be expressed intelligibly. I think to even communicate, you need an ontological referent that gives it intelligibility, and that's God. So, but apart from that, I think there's a number of other arguments, and I hope to get into those. Before we go on, does anybody have anything to say about what I just said?
Yeah, there's a big chunk of that that I agree with, because in classical philosophy, there's three branches: metaphysics, epistemology, and ethics, and they're intertwined with your overall. And that's why I've started delving into metaphysical a priori assumptions about the world. You're bringing you're trucking in inferences when you watch a debate or when you're asked questions about things. You truck in automatically metaphysical a priori assumptions that are completely different from a theist and a Christian. They're approaching these things from completely different starting points. So, like I tried to explain, a resurrection is not all that wildly implausible to somebody who already presupposes that God exists and God is omnipotent and awesomely powerful. Then a resurrection isn't wildly outlandish or all that heavy of a lift in terms of believing it. To somebody like Pine Creek, who already presupposes the supernatural does not occur, then even a religious experience like mine, it strikes him as wildly implausible. And so what you're saying, what you just said sort of matches that. You're bringing a lot to the table when you even start these conversations that isn't necessarily there on the surface, but it's informing how you view what's plausible, what's not plausible. And a lot of times atheists, without even noticing it, when I noticed in the debate you and I were in, Josh, when I said supernatural, now Steve and that guy were actually pretty reasonable and cool. They both automatically started talking about things that were really outlandish, like goblins and fairies. And whenever you say supernatural, they jumped to wildly implausible rather than slightly implausible. Does that make sense, what I just said?
Yeah. Before we go on, I just want to say, when I have in mind presupposing these presuppositions, I think these presuppositions are rationally held. That's what I mean by the dictates of common sense, that phrase I always use all the time, that are rationally held. And what I mean by that is how we live our life. We accept them in 99% of our life, but it's only when the atheist philosopher comes to his study that he denies causation or something like that, or that miracles are intrinsically improbable. It's only in that case where he is skeptical of those type of things, rather than looking at the whole package, the whole context, all of our background beliefs, which I think on Christian theism can be rationally justified.
Yeah, I have to agree with you. I think it's the question of the presupposition, like what both of you are saying. It's the idea of what is your presupposition? Do you have a presupposition, like what Craig said? Does God exist? To me, I've always had that presupposition. That seems like an axiom, a give me. It's just there. You can just tell. I mean, I asked my sister, I said, how do you know? How are you so confident in Christianity and that there's a God out there? And she points at the window to see outside. She's like, look. It's like, it seems so basic. I know it kills the atheist, but when you look at trees and you see the processes of how a seed can turn into this big, beautiful tree, and a sunflower can turn into a sunflower from this teeny little seed, and how we can turn into humans from these teeny little, sperm and egg combination. How does that happen? It's just, to me, it seems so obvious that there's a designer. So I don't really understand the atheists.
Yeah, the teleological teleological function in nature. Well, does the atheist just think it's a miracle that the embryo develops into a person just over and over? No, it's directed. It has a built-in goal directedness in it, and all of nature has that. As human beings, our goal, how do we explain us? We are directed at something else. We are rational animals, not mere animals, but we're directed at God. So and that's very easy to see. But the commonsensical part, when I look out the window, I see change occurring, the leaves dropping, the wind blowing. And in my recent debates, I've often asked, how do you account for that change, from potentiality to actuality? And it shows that there must be something already actual to have even the possibility for something to change from potential to actual. And in a hierarchy of causation or events that are going on right here and now, what explains why anything at all exists, or what explains what's holding everything here and now in existence? And I think the commonsensical notion is that God is the ultimate explanation. I want to see what Andrew, do you have anything to say about what we've been talking about?
Yeah. So, I mean, the major issue, and Stephanie touched on this, is if your intellect is blinded due to a defect in will, right? That you are not oriented or haven't developed your intellectual sense enough to detect these truths, you're not going to see it, right? And Stephanie and her sister and other people who are sort of in the natural state of being human can discern quite readily that there is a ground to existence, and it's very easy to infer that from the existence of order. And so that's the fundamental issue, right? Is that this is an error of will before it's an intellectual error, and that's part of it. And the great example of this is sometimes you will discuss like what rationality is with an atheist, and how for it to be rational, it needs grounds, and that grounds itself has to be rational and non-contingent, and basically show that if rationality allows us to understand the world, there has to be a grounding of logos. And they will just say, oh, then I have to reject rationality, right? And it's like, at that point, there's no argument to be had if you would rather reject rationality than the necessary conclusion.
Mm-hmm.
Can I share a funny screen?
Sure.
I want to share this this tweet that I saw today that I shared a little bit, but I think it's, oops, I hit the wrong button. Share, hold on. Oh, I'm allowed to share. Okay, let me just bring this up. It's so funny. There it is. Hopefully you guys, can you see that?
I can't.
I can't. I don't know if we have screen sharing in StreamYard.
Oh, maybe we don't have it so you can see it. Shoot.
Sorry. What's it
Wait,
say?
you might have to. You'll have to put it. Josh, you can kind of see it. You'll have to put it on the thing. You got to click on the person.
Yeah, Josh has to share the screen.
I have to click on
see where it says
share.
S.J. Thomason with that little screen next to mine?
Oh, yeah. Okay. And to...
That's it. Well, you can't really... I'll read it because...
Okay.
This is my veracity. So
oh, there it is. We can see it now.
It says, in the beginning, nothing exploded and became everything. And it says, did I say exploded? I meant nothing, just expanded from nowhere with no central point from just expansion. Oops, did I say nothing expanded? I meant everything has always been just expanding from nowhere. Wait, even though quantum mechanics proves time had a beginning, which implies everything had to not exist to have a beginning. And this all happened through simple laws of naturalism, no blueprint or reason. But we may never know the reason, but that doesn't prove God did it. You just don't know. Science. That's a logical fallacy called God of the gaps.
Mm-hmm.
I just think that's funny. I'm sorry.
No, that was good. A bunch of laughs.
Well, this guy on Twitter, I just found him recently, and he was tweeting this like a whole bunch of really funny things today. I was like falling off my chair.
Let me pick up on something Andrew said. Andrew, I think to even communicate, I think shows the expression of the logos. So I don't, if the atheist is even communicating with you, like trying to speak or give coherent sentences, well, his communication presumably is aimed at truth. Now, truth is, not contingent. Truth, as well as beauty and goodness and the oneness, they rely somewhere, not in our material world. So where do they reside? And I said this on one of my recent debates. I think it was with the Non Sequitur show. They reside in the mind of God. So you can't speak or you can't give coherent thoughts, informative thoughts, without presupposing God. This is called the Augustinian proof for the existence of God. It's first from, well, I think it's first from Augustine, but Plato actually talks about that. But I think Augustine and Thomas Aquinas used that proof.
Yeah, I think just looking at the person of Jesus gives us a lot of evidence of God. If you just look at what he did and how he transformed the world, he said, "Do not conform to this world, be transformed through me." And he has changed the world in such positive ways, and to the point where that suddenly during the Enlightenment, we come up with this whole idea of the axiomatic truth that all humans are created equally. It's like, where did the equal idea come from? Because we certainly weren't given equal treatment back in those days. They thought women were much less valuable than men back in Jesus' time. And then going before that to Aristotle and Plato. So all of the ways that our cultures have changed and grown closer to try to identify that objective moral standard. It's like the goalposts that we're all trying to go towards. I think the moral argument's really powerful.
Yeah, and Rodney Stark has talked a lot about this, the triumph of Christianity. I recommend everybody get that book. And he has some other books I've read, but that one's a good book. It shows how Christianity transformed the world. So look, if we have solid historical evidence for the resurrection of Jesus, despite the philosophical assumptions which atheists give. But if we have good historical reasons for the resurrection, and we have Western civilization based on this broadly conceived Judeo-Christian ethic, well, I think that makes the probability of Christianity going up significantly. So I don't see why Christianity should be doubted at all. I think the atheist has the burden of proof to give reasons why one shouldn't believe in God, based on the whole history of classical thought, based on the transformation of the West, the first universities, the development of the scientific method, of capitalism. All these things happened in this Western Europe mindset. A lot of the inventions, for example, gunpowder, they were created in China and in Europe independently. But China didn't make good use out of this because they didn't have that view of expansionism, of making use out of this, our manipulating nature. It's Christianity, that Judeo-Christian ethic. Not only the work ethic, but also how you can manipulate nature's laws, because it's something that can be discovered rationally, because it was created by a rational God. So it's no surprise that that the development of science, the first universities, the first hospitals, et cetera, and I have books on all this, it all started in Western Europe, within this broadly conceived Judeo-Christian mindset. So I think this puts the atheist on a very defensive hill.
I agree. I know Tangelo's in the chat saying the golden rule has transformed the world to the better, which I agree with that too.
Good point. Yeah, that's what we need more of. Not just treating people as means, but ends in themselves, good in themselves. Andrew and Craig, well, let me ask y'all, what are some other powerful arguments, or other powerful reasons that you think a person should be a Christian, or give Christianity another look, a fresh look? Craig, I'll start with you, I guess.
Well, I was going to tie it into what you just said before about precondition of intelligibility, because one of the things I've started moving to is the metaphysics of math. And the reason is because even the atheists, when Mac Delahunty was in the debate with Tyler Vila and Jay Dyer, he said in the debate, and almost every atheist would agree with this, yes, the laws of logic exist, and they are immaterial, invisible, transcendent, and inviolate. Now, there's an actual proof for a mathematical axiom, which is Gödel's incompleteness theorem. And the point being is that in order to use a mathematical axiom, you have to presuppose a mathematical axiom because it cannot be empirically verified for. Now, that the proof is Gödel's incompleteness theorem. And almost every atheist I know would agree with that. You can't do science without math. You have to assume a mathematical axiom in order to use it. And because it can't be empirically verified for. So they're already, if you're to be an intelligible atheist, okay, Matt Dillahunty already agreed to a huge chunk of this. Your sense-making apparati are located in the transcendent realm. So you either have to be a Platonist or a nominalist. A nominalist is someone who, with certain pre-qualifiers and preconditions, ascribes reality to the transcendent realm. That's already the beginning. That's not an atheist per se, and that's not a theist, but it's somewhere in between. That's like a sort of nuanced middle position that I expect a lot of atheists, to already have adopted, because a lot will. If you, I don't know if you guys know Thomas Nagel. Josh, you probably do. Stephanie, you might. Actually, Andrew probably does too. What it's like to be a bat. The first question I asked myself when I heard about him was, how is that guy staying an atheist? And how he reconciles it is a kind of Neoplatonism, sort of nominalist in between position, where he ascribes some reality to the transcendent realm, which is already kind of partially agreeing with theism a little bit. Does that make sense? I'm not sure if I said that well, but I think
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I know about. I even referenced Thomas Nagel in my debate with Stephen Law about how atheists hate God. I definitely believe that. I also believe numbers and laws of logic, those are from God's nature. So I think a better solution to Platonism, the atheistic Platonism, a different view than that, would be that numbers and abstract objects exist in the nature of God, in the mind of God.
Well, I would say that the better argument is, instead of trying to prove God through them, is to get the atheist to try and explain them, given the metaphysical a priori assumption of materialism / physicalism, because it's hard to reconcile. That's my point.
I would certainly do that. But if they then switch to Platonism, then that's when I would say, I think it completely undercuts that. I think it's a simpler explanation than having all these Platonic objects like the good, the beautiful.
Right. Well, I don't mean Platonism as like Plato. I'm talking about Platonism as it roughly translates in today's world, not actually the argument from the forums and all that. But specifically, literally Platonism. I mean, like, when you call someone a mathematical Platonist, they believe that numbers exist and that mathematics is discovered, not invented, which is ascribing reality to the transcendent realm. It's not the forms and all that.
Well,
I don't mean literally Platonism. I mean roughly Platonic as it relates to like math. So
I think there's a lot of mathematicians that believe they actually exist, that numbers can actually exist. And all I'm saying is
mathematical Platonists.
Yeah, all I'm saying, it's simpler.
Sorry to interrupt. Let me just say this. Quine started out as to prove mathematical fictionalism and became a reluctant mathematical Platonist, which is, I don't expect an atheist to be a Platonist, because that's in essence a theist, sort of, but a nominalist is kind of agreeing with certain aspects of what theism entails, because it's the precondition of intelligibility. But Quine started out as I'll just finish this and I'll be quiet. Quine started out as a fictionalist and then became a reluctant Platonist, and he has a proof for it. It's called the what's it called? The unusual effectiveness of mathematics, I think, is the argument. And it's one of the most influential arguments of the last 50 years or so, mathematically speaking.
Yeah, and Eugene Wigner talks about this a lot. And you can easily formulate an argument for the applicability of mathematics for the existence of God. What I'm saying is just where you place them. Do you place them in the nominal realm, or do you place them in a Platonic realm, or maybe in the divine intellect? And my argument that I used on the non sequitur show was just the Augustinian proof that you put them in a divine intellect. But I think certainly your argument certainly does undercut the naturalistic view of
Well, yeah,
mathematical objects.
I would parse the argument down so that it's harder to defeat. I understand what you're saying. Like that's the fourth proof from what's it, phasers.
Advisors.
Yeah, and there's, you should watch Joe Schmidt's take on, because I think he has a rebuttal to that as divine conceptualism. But I hear what you're saying. You know, it's a halfway decent argument, I think. But anyways, everybody else can go.
Okay, Andrew.
I think it's smarter to parse it down to a much simpler, less ambitious argument that the atheists would probably agree to in principle, because a lot of them already have. Like
Fair enough.
Matt Dillahunty did say in his debate, yes, the laws of logic exist, and they are immaterial, invisible, transcendent, and violent. And then Jay Dyer could have just said, okay, debate's over, I win, but then said, okay, now we need to ground those in God. And then Matt Dillahunty started re-winning the debate, because he started saying, kind of correctly, I'm not aware that I do have to justify those. And he's kind of right, because we are presupposing them. So the core of the argument is me and the atheist are on terra firma with a presupposition about math and logic that we both share.
I don't think that they're presupposed. I think when I say the better explanation, the simpler explanation is putting them in the mind of God. That is taking that realist perspective and saying it's a simpler explanation, a more efficient.
I just want to say there's crazy clicking background noise that it's gonna.
That's probably me.
Well, Andrew, do you what would and that was a very good argument. Thank you for sharing that, Craig. What argument, or what kind of argument do you think is a powerful argument to share to atheists, Andrew?
Yeah, I guess my thesis is always that it's never an intellectual error. It's always an error of will. And so I would sort of take a Jordan Peterson approach and talk about what does it mean to live in a world, right? And how do you deal with suffering? How do you deal with goodness and beauty in a very practical sense? And that it's sort of start at the behavioral substrate of what Christians mean when they say that they are living as though as the body of Christ, and that these are the fundamental sort of questions of praxis and practice that we have to answer, right? And in the modern world, we have to answer, what do we do with all these wonderful resources we have, right? And why do we continue to suffer, even though all these things that meet our biological and physical and material needs are relatively easily available? Mm-hmm. And so that's sort of the thrust and direction that I would go with.
Now, I think that is a very good argument. It's I think it's, in a lot of ways, it's more fundamental, because it shows that we're not just animatonic, individuals. I think there's a myth that, of radical individualism that goes along in society, in Western cultures, and we're not just meant to go our own way. We're meant to be in a community, in a polis, but in a community of people. So I think we're directed at something. Augustine talked about this. The heart is restless until it finds God. until it finds what it's looking for. And Kierkegaard talks about that. Do you want to dive into any of those points?
Yeah, I guess the only other thing I'd say is, to be a true citizen of the polis, you have to have a standard that is above the polis itself, and this gets into the understanding of God as the final lawmaker, and it also ties into the understanding of what is the sacrificial king, right? And what is it that Christ gives, not only on a psychological, symbolic level, but in an actual spiritual level. And all these things are necessary, right? And all of these things grow out of theism, but theism in Christianity is even more so on top of it.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think I was going to say something else. I forgot it. Forgot what I was going to say. SJ or Craig, do you have anything to say about or to piggyback on what Andrew is talking about, the longing for God, how we seek God, and that's a powerful, because a lot of the atheists throughout history, including Bertrand Russell, Sigmund Freud, I have all these quotes how they've said that they longed for God. So do y'all have anything else to say about what Andrew was getting at?
I love the first thing he started talking about, the Peterson-esque values-based argument. It's more an argument about the utility of religion, but I think it's a really, really, truly powerful one, because how Peterson started becoming, doing his thing was that as a sociologist, he started noticing the strong correlation between social cohesion and values in society and transcendent morality of religion. And he started making an argument that I think holds up really well when he presents it, about the values laden. I forget how Andrew said it, but I like the way he originally said it. The how you live. Religion is important in teaching you how you go about living your life in like the good and correct and right way. And ultimately, it does tie back to Quine too, because I think part of the reason why Peterson started becoming kind of a Christian is he started noticing that religion is really, really useful as a sociological construct, and he started going, how could it be that useful if there isn't truth in it? He started analyzing the Bible from a more of a psychological perspective with metaphorical truth, and started finding the same thing. So he started finding like real deep meaning in a lot of the Old Testament stories, and going, how could they have this? How could it be this pregnant with meaning if there isn't real truth in it? That's why he's almost a believer now. He's not quite, but he's kind of in that sort of where I was when I was like 26.
I think he's a lot closer than you might think. He's said some stuff about Jesus lately that blew my mind. I think he knows.
Really? I missed that.
Yeah, there's some really good videos out there, really recent. And his wife is a Christian, and apparently she's been really working on him. So.
Well, I posted the one where he broke down crying, talking about Jesus. Is that the one you're talking about on Jonathan?
I saw that one. There's another one where he said, "How can you deny the resurrection?" or something like that. So there's a good one that's out there.
We got him.
Yeah,
he's got
he's coming to the camp.
Ties, so that's going to be a welcome.
Yeah,
welcome to the kingdom.
And just to be clear, I'm not. I personally am not making a social utility argument for religion. I am saying that literally Christianity is what allows you as an individual to navigate the sufferings and spiritual issues of life, and that it can of course start with a pragmatic understanding of truth, right? So something is true if it is useful, right? But that's just the starting point. And this is about a personal connection to the worldview of Christianity for an individual, not necessarily like social effects that have utility.
Hey, I would like to piggyback on that a little bit. We're all saying, it kind of reminds me of something that C.S. Lewis said too. And he was talking about when he first was an atheist. C.S. Lewis was an atheist, and he said he started thinking about morals and and how the universe is just so cruel. And he thought, well, how did I get this concept that the universe is cruel and that there's a problem of evil if there's no corruption of love? And he said, you don't know what a straight line is unless you see a crooked one. And so he realized there had to be a moral lawgiver, and it has to be transcendent to the population because it transcends our cultures, it transcends time. So there has to be this lawgiver, and another great argument for God.
Yeah. Well, I think that's because we all have this natural inclination to the divine. That's how we can know that what binds us together as people is made in the image of God. That's how we can love atheists, but say that they are wrong, that their communication isn't consistent with how they live their lives. They're living as if Christianity is true, but their communication is somewhere else. It's in radical individualism land. So we have that natural inclination to aim to come after God, to strive towards God. And if what we usually strive for usually exists, like if a person's hungry, it's probable that food exists. Well, if a person or people strive for God, seek after God, and this is what history tells us, atheists too, they have strived for God, then perhaps there's something transcendent from which they are striving towards.
Yeah. I want to say, just to piggyback on the universe is cruel, because I also see Diogenes is making a comment that that's not a good argument. I think that another good argument is the suffering idea, because you say, well, why do these humans suffer? Why should suffering be a part of our earth? But as I've mentioned before, when you look at studies like the Globe study, the places where they have the highest levels of suffering, like in Africa, and also historical suffering, like in Ireland, when you go back generations, but you can see the places where they've had that suffering or historical suffering, they also have the highest levels of belief in God. And relatively speaking, Ireland relative to Europe and Africa is like 99% of people believe in God. And they also have the highest levels of humane orientation, which is kindness and benevolence. And so just think about that.
That ties
soul building
to what Andrew was saying, because what the irony is that what religion actually historically gives people is coping mechanisms for the perennial questions of life. And if it's Christianity that's healthy and practiced right, it gives people actual answers, not answers of like propositional answers. That's what we've been trying to shoehorn into nowadays. It gives you actually coping mechanisms for suffering.
I don't know if I agree with that. I think what you said is broadly true, but I think that there's a current where we can that there's a current of discovering God. And I think the most longest lasting religions have given the best explanations for why certain things happen and for how to take away that sin. So I don't think it's any surprise that the monotheistic religions, Islam, Judaism, Christianity, comprise the vast majority of the earth, and the polytheistic religions of small gods, of smaller power and small scope, not as strong. They don't demand as much. I don't think they really get to the heart of of us as human beings, what we need as people, what we seek to, not the gods, but God
I'm not
himself.
sure if that has to do with what I said. What I was talking about was Stephanie said in like a place where there's a lot of suffering, you tend to find elevated examples of Christianity, right? And that's because Christianity actually offers you answers. It offers you a really powerful,
the best answers.
Right, but
the cross. Christianity offers the cross. It explains suffering right through Jesus.
You have the paradox of in the a lot of slaves became Christians, and it offered them comfort in their tribulation. That's one of the key selling points of Christianity. I give you peace, I leave with you, not like the world gives, and come to me and find peace for your soul. So it gives you, I don't mean answers like propositional answers, here's the meaning to your suffering. I mean, it gives you an answer for someone who's really in a tough time. It doesn't work with everybody. I mean, granted, a lot of atheists will probably hear this and go, no, it doesn't. But that's why there's in a place like Ireland where times are tough, people turn to church, because it's a natural respite from, the harsh and angry world. You run to the peace of the cross.
Now I agree with you as far as it goes. All I was saying is that religion is not merely a coping mechanism, but I think the history of religions is a way of a progressive understanding.
I don't think it's merely a coping mechanism. I'm
Okay.
a Christian. I just as an argument to be presented for a secular person.
Okay.
It gives you, because for example, John Vervaeke has become really into the meaning crisis and religion as answers. Why he thinks the meaning crisis is happening is because we don't have religion anymore. Because religion gives people coping mechanisms for the perennial questions, the really, really tough, challenging questions of life. I don't think it's merely that.
Yeah.
Obviously, I'm a Christian, but I understand the logic of that. And I think logic of that is where we make good arguments.
I certainly agree with you. I think probably what I should have said is, rather than I disagree with you, as I would have, I want to amend that, but because I think that there's a way to show that history itself, the study of history, is a progressive understanding of theology, from polytheism to monotheism. I believe that there was a primitive monotheism, and I've used that in a debate. But I think people can go and form their own gods for their own liking that serve limited scope and limited power. But when you come to grips the existential problems with humanity, what being a person really is, you come back to monotheism. And I think the history of religions, the history of ideas, is a progressive understanding of God. And I don't think, that, like I said, that that monotheism is an accident. I don't think that most of the world is comprised of either Islamic, Christian, or a Judeo-Christian ethic is an accident. I think it's people have chose those because they are more rational than the polytheistic gods of antiquity.
Yeah, excuse me. I think all of those arguments are good, and I think that the whole idea is you figure out what's the best answer, what explains our origins, our meaning, our morality, our destiny, our purpose. It's really beautiful how Christianity well explains everything, those big questions in life.
Andrew, so far of what we said, and I think what SJ just said is very important. If you're going to talk to an atheist or talk to a non-believer or someone like that about meaning, morality, destiny, and so forth, how would you incorporate those concepts, which SJ just mentioned, into like an overall argument for why Christianity tackles all these issues in a way that, atheism simply cannot?
Yeah, generally the approach I use is to point out that the beliefs or axioms that you get from Christianity have implications to these multiple domains in a coherent way. And that typically the approach for more secular people is to use an ad hoc basis, right? So they will be consequentialists or utilitarians, or maybe a deontologist. Yeah, deontologist for ethics. They might affirm sort of evolutionary biology and biology. They might be a socialist or a free marketist in economics. And all these things are sort of done on an ad hoc basis such that the domains don't connect together, right? And if you're looking for a guide to life and a philosophy of life, which is one of the purposes of religion, you need something that will allow you to coherently navigate all domains on a non-ad hoc basis.
How would you incorporate virtues into that? I know a lot of people, a lot of secularists, they have, like you mentioned, these different value systems, deontology or utilitarianism, and I think those have problems with them. But you've talked a lot about virtue ethics, how we need how would can you delve into that a little bit? How would you use how is virtue ethics different from those or better?
Yeah, I mean, part of the tie-in of virtue ethics is if virtue ethics is correct, which I believe it is, it implies that the fundamental way of looking at human beings is spiritual in nature. And so that's the key part. And that means that any religion that's accurate to that has to look at humans as both important and spiritual in nature, right? So, and that would imply Abrahamic religions or other things where the humans are the most important thing from a spiritual perspective outside of God himself.
Yeah. Nice, very nice. I think y'all have given some great arguments and great reasons to be a Christian. We did a poll recently. Who do you think could give the best arguments for being a Christian? This is just like a tongue-in-cheek poll. Who was leading that poll? Do y'all know?
I used all my stock accounts to vote, so I probably won.
Okay.
Yeah, I think Craig won. Craig was in the lead.
Craig, I think you won.
Well, I won.
Well, there was a problem with the Twitter algorithm, and most of those votes were supposed to go to me. I just found out, so I'm very proud to have won that.
So I didn't win.
Hey, can I answer something I saw in the chat, Josh, real quick?
I want to see those results. I want to see.
Okay, so when I said origins, I said Christianity explains our origins. So you go to the Bible, Genesis, the beginning. There was a beginning. The universe had a beginning. That is unlike a lot of other religions that believe that it's cyclical. There's a cyclical process of creation and destruction. And then it has meaning. Jesus explained our meaning and our purpose through him. We want to love him, emulate him, and do what he says to do. You love the Lord above all else and love your neighbors as yourselves. And John 3:16 and all those great verses that explain the afterlife. We have destiny, the afterlife. It explains heaven and how it's going to be paradise and how even the thief on the cross got to go there. And it explains how you can reconcile God's perfect mercy with his perfect justice through the cross. And then what did I see? Morality. It explains exactly what we're seeking, what our perfect morality is. And it even explains the final thing that I didn't is our economic systems. So it explains this idea of in the parable of the talents, why we're supposed to work hard. We're supposed to invest in our talents. And Paul told the people, don't be lazy, get out there and work. And so people who like the system where there's one person's pretending to work, the other's pretending to pay, like communism, which is steeped in atheism. That's problematic. That's why we're not communists. We're capitalists in Christian societies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's great. I was just looking over it. Before we go to any more questions from the audience, I don't know if there's any more, but I think we did mention or allude to a number of different arguments, like the argument from contingency, the Aristotelian argument, the argument from rationality, the argument from mathematics. Craig focused a lot on that. Fine-tuning, how an embryo naturally develops into a person. That's the teleological nature. That's science itself. Theism gives an explanation for that because it's reality is teleological driven, not chaotic, or meaning chaotic. We gave an argument for the resurrection of virtue ethics. See, I think there are a lot of different arguments, a lot of different reasons that we could give for Christianity. I just don't see a reason not to be a Christian. Instead of looking at, mere, unquote unquote, just mere reason, look at everything. Look at all of it before you make a probabilistic evaluation. Look at all the arguments. Instead of giving the problem of evil, of what's more probable, you have to look at the whole panoply of arguments for the existence of God, for natural theology, for the Western intellectual tradition. So I think the burden of proof is squarely on the atheist's shoulders. I think we're justified in believing that Christianity is true until an atheist can give a powerful argument for thinking otherwise. So anyway, we've been going for, I guess, an hour. Do we have any final comments, or do you have any other things in the apologetics world that we want to talk about? Craig, do you have anything you want to delve onto or piggyback onto or say?
Well, are we wrapping up?
No, not necessarily.
There's a lot of stuff that I can start talking about, but I don't know how much time we want. How much time
we'll go.
Want to give?
I'm probably not going to go too much longer. I could just.
We'll go for how about 15 or 20 minutes? Is that okay with everyone?
Yeah, sadly I have to hop off.
Okay, it's good talking to you. Let's give Andrew a hand of applause. Thank you, Andrew.
Woo! You did it.
You did it. Good job. Okay.
The hard problem of consciousness is as the challenge to materialism, and then there's a lot of other stuff that I like to talk about, but I don't know what you guys want to talk about. So I'm flexible, whatever.
Well, let's go into consciousness, I guess. The hard problem of consciousness. I think this is. I think it's a defeater for naturalism. I certainly think that. What do you think?
I think it's a challenge to the materialist physicalist paradigm, like a really strong one. That's why Kastrup became an idealist, because he had to. He discovered, he was a scientist, and then he discovered the hard problem of consciousness through David Chalmers, and he basically decided that he had to change his metaphysics in response, because the hard problem of consciousness, that I define it as, consciousness is in principle irreducible to strictly physical properties. He decided that it was such an unbridgeable chasm that he changed his whole metaphysical a priori assumptions about the world as a philosopher in response. And I think it's a challenge to materialism. And then I have my quantum mechanics argument that I think is just a defeater for materialism. So however you guys want to take it, it's up to you guys.
Well, I certainly go along the same way. I don't get into the quantum mechanics much, but I certainly think it's a defeater or a massive problem for the naturalist. Yeah, that's how I think it's irreducibly that we have that consciousness is irreducibly there. SJ.
Yeah, I agree. I think consciousness is a big problem for them. And the other big problem for them is our human exceptionalism. What they think that we're just meaningless splats here on this planet who are thinking falsely that we're important. So we're deluded, according to their view. We're deluded little animals on this planet who think we're important, and we think we're superior to animals, or you'll even have the atheists who don't think they're superior to animals. And that's always a jolly thing to hear.
A meat puppet? what's it called? What's the word they use? Like a meat puppet, or is that apology?
Yeah, we're just we're just like, what is it? Frank Turek always talks about meaningless. Was it moist robots? We're just meaningless moist robots.
Okay.
Who have no, and so we're just deluded because we think that we actually have meaning and purpose, and we're important and we're valuable.
Yeah.
Where's that coming from in an atheistic perspective?
Yeah. Well, again, that background beliefs, they're not acting like they're metaphysics. They're incorporating, this background knowledge of treating us not as mere animals, but thinking of people as something different than mere animals.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, God said we're made in God's image. That gives us, that also explains this. It explains why we have these feelings that we're important, we're valuable. We have intrinsic value. That's really important to know that God made us in his image, Genesis 1:27.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Yeah.
and that's a core. I don't know if you guys watch the Rationality rules. I was going to do a video on it. Oh, that's a core Peterson-esque argument too, where he was analyzing Peterson and he was talking about the core values of Western civilization. And one of the two key ones that are based on the Bible, there are three that are really important. Freedom of speech, which as far as I can tell is not based on the Bible at all. Maybe it is, but I don't know where. And the intrinsic worth of the individual, which is we're made of the image of God in the Old Testament. And then that which you've done unto the least of my children, you've done unto me, which is basically reiterating that in the New Testament. Every single solitary person has intrinsic value, and that's the foundation of our system. And then the rule of law, which is foundational Western civilization. So those two of three core values of Western civilization are directly from the Bible, like directly. Yeah, I don't think they appeared before the Bible. I don't think there was such a thing as those human beings over there are also human beings like us in other religious texts. There may be, but I'm not aware of them. Do you know what I'm saying? Like there's a love your neighbor as yourself, and then there's an implication that everybody is your neighbor in Christianity because we're all made in the image of God.
Yeah.
And everyone back then was tribal. Your neighbor was someone you killed because they were dangerous.
And
Right?
and that's that progressive theology that I've talked about, or that I've read, but I emphasize a lot when I talk about how Christianity paved the way for it incorporated many laws in Justinian's the Institutes by Justinian in 536 AD, and then you had some other stuff in the 8th century, and then in the 12th century by Thomas Aquinas and others. This evolved into or progressed into canon law. This is really the basis of our law system. It brought together the best of Roman law, the best of Greek and Roman law, and Justinian really synthesized it, and Thomas Aquinas did too, and the canon lawyers in the scholastics really synthesized it in accordance with theology, Christian theology, with those basic principles. So our law system, the not presumed guilty, innocent until proven guilty, treating like intrinsic importance and so forth, and there's others. It's really based on theology, and a lot of people, they don't understand this, but a lot of our other things, like I say, the development of science, the first universities or hospitals, and different things, so many other things were. It's because of this Western intellectual tradition pushed by Christianity and others, but pushed by Christianity because it had a sufficient amount of political freedom, of freedom of people to the wealth wasn't confiscated unnecessarily. People weren't just not given the rule of law, but you had a sufficient amount of political freedom and science and so forth, and a number of other things. The law system, that's what helped Christianity emerge above the rest. And it wasn't just because of the Enlightenment. Before the Enlightenment, you had canon law, and you had Justinian in 536, and Thomas Aquinas, and the Scholastics. So it's really naive to bring up the Enlightenment. The Enlightenment was the culmination of 1,500 years of Christian thought codifying these laws and these assumptions into our law system and so forth.
Stephanie, did you watch the? It's related to this. Did you watch the last Unbelievable with what's his face?
Yes.
And the other what's his
I
name?
reviewed it.
Oh, that's right. You did review it. I only watched the first 20 minutes or half an hour.
Yeah, no, I saw the whole thing.
It's very related to this topic, correct?
Yeah.
Glenn Scribner.
Yeah. I was watching. Well, Bart Ehrman's. He has on the Teaching Company website, which I subscribe to. You can watch these courses, and I was watching a lot of them. How he talked about them. I think I mentioned I wasn't entirely impressed, but I didn't get all the way through. But I think he's piggybacking on a lot of the work of Rodney Stark and Ronald Numbers. A lot of these
he brought up Rodney Stark.
Okay, great. Yeah. So I think that helps to show, what reason do we have for denying Christianity once you have the resurrection of Jesus, good arguments, and then you have, Western civilization being largely based on this. Mm-hmm. So I'm throwing up my hands and saying, no, you atheists, you have the burden of proof. If anybody does, you have it. I don't think we have it. So I really
Amen.
appreciate that. Okay. Well, I think we're gonna wrap it up. We've been here for, I don't know, I can't see very good. I have to take
about an hour and 12 minutes. It's good.
Oh, okay. Well, I think that's a good podcast. I think it was fun.
Yeah, this was good.
And I would like for you to officially renounce.
Do you realize we closed by assigning the burden of proof to atheists? So,
yeah,
atheists, did you hear that?
Atheists, it's on you.
God does not exist, or give me the tithes.
Yeah.
Okay.
And Craig and I are going to go on Friday up against a very worthy opponent named Jeff Williams. So you guys come on there. It's on my channel. It's going to be at 3:00 Eastern on Friday. Be sure to be there.
Yes.
What I was going to say is I would like y'all to renounce the votes that you've got and transfer them to me and declare me the winner.
You're the winner, Josh. Good to go.
Thank you.
Josh.
Thank you.
You can have the 2 votes that I got.
How many? I think I got 4.
I'll await my trophy in the mail that you will send.
It's good stuff.
Okay. Well, thank you everybody for watching. This has been a great episode. Give Christianity a look, because there's lots of good reasons for it. There's very weak reasons for rejecting it. There's very weak reasons for being an atheist, in my view. But look at the whole case, not just one line or two. Look at the whole Western intellectual tradition.
Look at the trees. Feel them in your heart.
Look at the trees. Look at the rainbows. I'm serious. I'm not kidding. Look at the sky at the nighttime. Especially if you're out in the middle of the ocean or you're somewhere out where you can actually see the sky. So many times we can't see all the stars.
Well, if it changes, if the trees change, if anything in the sky changes or the sky itself changes, what accounts for that change? There must be something changeless. So again, we're back to God. It's so easy to show that God exists. Mm-hmm. Okay. Anyway, thank y'all very much. This has been a great podcast, and we're signing out. Bye-bye, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.